And we continue. Dennis with you here. Live streams are still up on Facebook, on YouTube, and on X, and our audience on KTN. Always good to have you here this morning as we continue with a number of things. There is an international day, and there is often one that we can commemorate. And we're commemorating today the International Day of Nurses. And the question that we're asking today, is there much to smile about? Joining us in the room this morning is the Secretary General of the Kenya National Union of Nurses, and that is Seth Panyako. Seth, good morning.
Good morning.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
It's like we say happy birthday, but in this case, we say happy International Nurses Day.
Nurses Day, yes.
Yeah. So
Nurses Week.
Nurses. Oh, it's a week.
It's a week.
Yes. All right, we give ourselves a week. Why not?
All right.
And of course, we're going to localize this conversation. We'll look at it broadly around, what happens and some of the interventions that are being sought after for nurses, and then we'll come back and look at what's happening, on a local front. But before we do that, Dennis will tell you what country we are in this week. Of course, you know that you're going to have to interpret the proverb for us. Then he'll tell you what the proverb is, and then we would like to hear your interpretation. All right.
So today we are in the Islamic Maghreb region of the continent. That is the northern part of the continent. And the country we are in today is Libya. Now, Libya is bordering countries like Egypt, Sudan, Chad, Niger, Algeria, Tunisia, and the Mediterranean Sea. It is a country with a population of around 7 million people, and gained its independence from Italy between 1911 to 1943, gained independence in 1951. Muammar Gaddafi ruled the country from 1969 to 2011. But we know what he did for that country. A lot to be said. But he was kicked out of that power during the uprising in the country. Today's proverb: the flute player dies with his finger shaking. The flute player dies with his finger shaking. What do you make of that?
That's a tricky one. Well, I think it means that if you are a good player, you when you die, you'll die when people still think about you. People still know you. We have, when you, for example, you're a leader and you leave the leadership sphere, you go in the village, everybody forgets about you very fast. But if you have done very good things during your leadership, the legacy remains like Gaddafi. Gaddafi died and he did so many good things for the Libyans. And when those white people thought that an African should not be able to do that, the continent of Africa, they schemed to have him removed and ultimately killed like an animal. So when now today, wherever he is, if he's able to hear, he's very happy because Africans are saying they lost a statesman and a true African. So his fingers are still shaking wherever he is.
There you go. Still shaking. Okay. I think great interpretation, and we can still look at some of these issues even till now. That you also remember the flute player even after they've gone, like you've given examples of today.
Correct. We still remember Maradona. We still remember Pele. We still remember very, very many people. We, even in boxing, still remember Kina Muhammad Ali. We still remember Kipchoge Keino. Yeah.
We remember the greats, that's for sure. And they went with their fingers still shaking.
Correct.
That's true. International Nurses Day 2025. For many people who did not know that there was International Nurses Day, and that even as we look into that, I think some of the questions is that, as we do, why is it necessary for us to have a day when it's set aside just for, remembering this work from your point of view? Seth?
It's very important because this is something that did not begin today. It began long time ago, before nursing became conventional or what it is today. In the years when we didn't have proper organized nursing and a proper organized healthcare system, and nurses were celebrating each and every passing day. And the reason for celebration today is for us to recognize and appreciate those who paved way for the current nursing, and also to appreciate and recognize the incredible job that is being done by the current nurses. And we also recognize and prepare the future of the nursing, those who are coming to to play nursing, where when we are out of this scene, those are the students. And that's why 8th of every May is dedicated to recognize the nursing students. Yes.
Okay.
So that's why it's a week. It has various events.
Yeah.
And between 6th and 12th, on 8th is dedicated to the nursing students.
The nursing student.
Yes.
So, nursing is such a great career, noble career, one would say, due to the services it gives to the population across the world population. But let's talk about the nursing career in our country as we speak. As we celebrate or observe the Nurses Week, is there anything to celebrate back in Kenya?
There are very many strides that have been made so far in the nursing profession. To say that we have not achieved anything will be a defeatist statement, and that will not be accurate. For example, nursing has continued to evolve over years. I told you before the Crimean War, that was around 1853 to around 1856 there. When we had that war, and there was a nurse called Florence Nightingale that left America to Britain to go and take care of the soldiers. And when he reached there, he found the soldiers were living in very pathetic conditions. Sanitation was very bad, and the death was part of the disease. It means that those who are dying were almost equal to those who are sick. So when she went there, the first thing she did was to institute sanitation system to ensure that the soldiers are kept in good place. So sanitation hospitals began at that time. He put up the system. There was not enough medication. He started taking statistics and doing all those kind of things. So he brought up, he started what we call now the current modern nursing, started doing the Crimean War. And this was the work of Florence Nightingale. And she brought up the issue of good hygiene, care, and she was the first woman to establish a school of nursing in 1860. And she was the first manager of any hospital in the world. So when I see other people saying they are managers and nurses cannot be managers, I wonder whether they know who founded the hospital management system. That was the work of the Florence Nightingale, and she was the first manager of any known hospital in the world. Even when you look at the Red Cross, it was founded by the American nurses, Clara and the father and the sister and the other gentleman. But those things today are being managed by others. So from that time, nursing has continued to grow up to today. We have, for example, when we came as a union, we may say that nursing had very many challenges. One of the challenges was acute staff shortage. And during that time, we had about 8,700 nurses in the public sector. And when we came as a union, we started agitating for safe nursing staffing levels, because if you don't have safe nursing staffing levels, you are going to have both the problem with the patient and the patient service delivery to the patient, and also the burnout for the nurses themselves. So we have fought, and up to now, as I speak today, we have over 32,000 nurses in the public sector. So for a period of 10 years, we, as a union, we have managed to have that improve. When we look at the issue of the nursing union itself, is a call for celebration. In the past, nurses did not have a platform through which they could air the issues in terms of employment, the grievances, and a legally identified, recognized instrument, that platform that they could air their views in employment, welfare, and they could have the privilege to negotiate with the government. And now when this union came in, it has given a voice to the nurses, and that is why the welfare of the nurses continues to improve day in, day out. But we have so many challenges that are yet to be addressed. But we are not saying that we have not moved from somewhere to somewhere.
Okay, so has the welfare of nurses improved? Do a comparison for us from before nurses were unionized in Kenya until this point, whereby you say the situations have improved. What are things that have improved over time?
Quite a number of things, and very many which are very good. I've told you, first of all, in terms of the staffing levels, we have almost tripled, more than 3 times what we had in 2013. From 2013 up to now, about 10 years, and we have the number of nurses moved in the public sector alone, moved from about 8,700 to more than 32,000. That's an achievement. Number 2 is that the general overall pay for the nurses during that time was around 27,000 gross. And the pay for the nurses has slightly improved to reasonable levels that make nurses live a better life, though they are not yet living a decent life. But we are getting there. We are not far away from where we were. I can say also that we have tripled the pay for the nurses for the last 10 years. You remember from 27,000 to, I don't want to go into the figures. Some people start talking about those figures. But we're saying generally the pay for the nurses has improved. The nursing education has also improved, though that may be attributed to collective responsibilities of both the trade unions, professional association, the regulator, and the Minister of Health. We now have nurses who are professors. We've had one of the most successful CEO in Kenya, at Kenyatta University, teaching at Research Hospital, has been a nurse, Dr. Dagani. These are kind of achievement that we've made as a profession. And the Nursing Council has also continued to grow from the Nursing Council of Kenya to the Nursing Council of Kenya midwives. So from where I sit, even when you go to hospitals, maybe both of you are young people, but if you talk to older people who gave birth to maybe young people like us, me I'm a very old age. Our parents might not be there. Most of them have started going away. But if you spoke to someone you can call as a grandmother, if she's still alive, you ask her when you are giving birth to my dad, how was the situation at the hospital? She'll tell you that when you go to hospital during those days, a nurse will do a sweater, and when you are giving birth, she will give you that sweater you put to a child. You think it's a gift. When you want to leave, nurse will tell you, I've not paid for my sweater. Because nurses' income was so minimal that it will not be able to sustain the nurses at that time. But through our activities as a trade union, we have improved. You don't see that kind of things in hospitals. Nurses could even do hawking in hospitals during those years. Today, we live a life, I can say, next to dignified life. We are living a dignified life. We may not be living very, very, in terms of the income compared to others, but we are living a dignified life, because those are signs of a life that's not dignified. But with the current taxation, it has tried to pull nurses back to where they were. When you look at the taxation in terms of the housing levy, where we are supposed to give money to these fellows in government to build houses, sell and steal that money, and then NHIF, NSSF is okay because that's their money, they'll get it at the end of the day. We may not complain much about it. But when you look at NHIF, which has been dismantled, and they have brought this sha and shisha, you are paying now 2.7% of your gross salary. Even your house allowance, which is meant for you to go and live in a decent house, is being taxed to go to health. Then why should you have a housing allowance when you are being taxed the housing allowance to provide you health? So some of these things don't make logic. All taxations and levies, apart from the tax, all levies should go to the basic salary. So when you look at the amount we were paying during that time in NHIF, was quite low, but the services were superior to what is being offered today. So you can see that those kind of taxes and levies have pushed nurses back, is pushing nurses back to very hard times.
And we talk about the taxes that have been levied as we speak right now. Yet again, we also know the fact that the nurses through your union have been having discussions with the government through CBAs and agreements that ought to be implemented. And there has been an issue with the implementation of the same. Would you admit or disabuse that the nurses are listened to as a profession that is very critical for this country?
The question you asked was, is there something to celebrate? Maybe I was waiting for the next one. Are there things to...
It was coming. It was coming.
Probably that's what you're asking in a different way. I have to say that nurses have very critical issues that have not been addressed. One of the current critical issues is the issue of the universal health coverage staff. You cannot talk about universal health coverage staff when the people who are supposed to be offering those services are being frustrated.
True.
And when you look at, for example, in health sector, we have about 18 cutters. And out of the 18 cutters, different level of staff, like the physio, the nurses, the lab people, doctors, we all have different 18. sorry for that. 18 different cutters. Now, or different professions. In this health sector, is only one profession that is benefiting. The benefit of in the health sector, all the privileges are going to only doctors. Because even you look at the UHC staff, you've not had any doctor complaining. Why? Because they are paid salary according to the SRC approved and what is contained in the CBA for the doctors. But the nurses and the other healthcare staff are paid 40,000 and 50,000 without even that salary was not set by SRC, because salary is supposed to be for the public servants supposed to be advised by the SRC to come up with the salary, but for the state officer is supposed to be set by SRC. This salary that was set by something else, but which is not, we don't know who said that salary, and we have had about 5 years of this staff working under these conditions. So we have continued to fight over this issue for them to be absorbed. The first 3 years contract lapsed. They were added another 1 year. They lapsed. And they said they were to be absorbed after the lapse of that 1 year. You remember I was here one day and I said I'm confident that they are going to be absorbed. And when I was in studio, I received a letter of commitment from the Minister of Health that these nurses were going to be absorbed last year in June, which never happened. And these are the kind of disappointment that we have when government make commitments to citizens and refuses to fulfill. The question will be, why has money been provided to absorb doctors on UHC?
Right.
Why has money been provided to pay doctors according to approved salaries and not other health workers? And this thing continues to boil up to the extent that now nurses are asking me it's time for us now to go on strike and fight for our rights, because from the time this government came in place, nurses have never been on national strike, and we are about to do that. That's an area that is very painful to us. Another area is the return to work formula of 2017. You talked about agreement with the government. And again, that agreement has never been fulfilled. The government has made a promise now from 2017 up to now. We are talking of almost 5 years plus. The government has not been able to fulfill. The only hospital that has employment agent within government that has fully implemented that return to work formula is Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital.
Right.
The rest have not. County governments tried to start implementing, and SRC came in and interfered.
Is that the reason? I'm sorry, I have to interject at that point, because we say that have not been able to implement Moi Teaching and Referral in the nation are those who've been able to implement the CBA.
Correct.
When you enter into a CBA with a group of individuals, with a group of people, is that what you're saying is that over time, based on your demands and what we're able to do, we will meet you here. We will do 1, 2, 3.
Correct.
That by the time this period has come to an end, we will have ensured that we have done this.
Correct.
And you're given 5 years. CBA more or less is 4 or 5 years, isn't it?
It's 4 years.
It's 4 years.
Actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's 4 years. And that one would also assume that the elements of a CBA are met because they're well within the reach of the one who is offering, to the acceptance of those who are demanding, right?
Yes.
So why would you not then be able to fulfill the tenets of a CBA?
From where I sit, I think SRC has been trying to survive over years. And they have been survived on the background of them frustrating public servants who have no political power to interfere with them. Because when you look at Parliament, whenever they touched Parliament, and Parliament will threaten them, they will come round and approve the same things they had denied Parliament. But for the health workers, what has been discussed even with government, and government has said we are able to pay, SRC comes and say do not pay. We are looking at the wage bill. But when they look at the wage bill of members of Parliament and state officers, when you look at what they pay, what they earn, I kept asking myself, if a state officer is earning about $1 million plus those other money they are getting, is there a petrol station for a state officer and a petrol station different for public servants, so that when you go to fuel your small car, you'll be told, oh, you are a public servant, petrol will go for 50 shillings per litre. Is there a supermarket for state officers and a supermarket for public servants? So this thing raises a question of decent work, decent payment for work. We have been living on minimum wage. The issue of minimum wage should now be removed. We should be talking about decent pay. So there is a big gap between the differential wage between those who are earning high and those who are earning low is so wide that you may not be able to compare. The people they call support staff here in Nairobi, If you find somebody's earning 18,000 gross salary, and they call you a support staff. Even if you have not gone to school, you are a father. You are a mother.
Yeah.
The ideal of taking care of your family is not different from the ideal of a state officer taking care of. And a state officer, I mean the cabinet secretary, the principal secretary, those directors, those big people in offices. It's not different from a cleaner who has a wife who has children, or a cleaner who has a husband who has children, who depend on them. We are all parents.
It's true. And I think, some things that we overlook sometimes, Seth, is that we assume that we know what everybody that we sometimes clamor and make noise about actually does, right?
Correct.
We say clinical officers, we say doctors, we say nurses. I want you to walk us through essentially what a nurse does. We can assume that you go to hospital, we see a nurse, and you just think, well, he or she is over there doing what nurses are supposed to do. So when they come and they're making noise, we say, okay, why are you making noise? Really, what do you do? Which can be insensitive to a certain extent and by nature.
We always.
We always.
Continue. Finish first.
So my question is, what does a nurse do? And before, we used to think that, number one, nurses are only women. Until enlightenment beat a lot of people in the head. And so what are the roles? And we say a nurse is not yet a doctor wanting to be a doctor, but in many cases that's not true. There are some people who went to school to be nurses and want to continue in their career as nurses. You don't aspire to be a doctor. Anyway, I may be answering for you, but what does a nurse actually do? And let's look at it in the Kenyan context.
Yeah, we always say in Kenya that nurses, we are the hospitals. Without nurses, there can be no hospital. There can be no healthcare system in the world. If nurses go on strike today, we close hospital literally, put bad locks and go home. Any other person who goes on strike, we don't close hospitals. We have several county governments where doctors are on strike. Hospitals are open.
Operating.
They have not closed. No, they may not be operating actually, because you can't operate fully without doctors. These people play different roles that are key in hospitals. To try to say that you can operate without doctors, that will not be correct. We have certain services that are offered purely by nurses alone. But let me go to the generality of the roles of the nurses. Nurses in hospitals are charged with the responsibility of receiving patients, assessing them, making the nursing diagnosis, and drawing a plan on how to attend to this patient and implementing that plan. For example, when you come to the hospital as a nurse, I will first take your vital signs to a general examination. I'll be the nurse who will determine who is coming to see you. If you are very much injured, I will have to take you to critical area where I will not wait for the doctor to come there. I'll push you to a critical room and I'll say, this one is very critically ill, and I'll call the doctor to see you when I'm already attending to you. So we assess the patients. We make nursing diagnosis. We plan how to implement those nursing diagnoses, and we implement and we evaluate. That's what we call the nursing process. It defines what nurses do in hospital theoretically. Theoretically, we assess, we diagnose, we plan, we implement, and we evaluate. And through this process, we are interdependently working with other departments. So once you have taken your vital signs, you have decided the patient's going to critical area, or this is a patient, you will wait for the routine doctor to see, or clinician to see who's there. Then the patient is seen, you escort the patient to where it's supposed to go. If the patient is supposed to be given medication, for example, that casualty area or outpatient department, when the doctor has seen that patient, has made prescription, you come and interpret that prescription, what's supposed to be done. What are the procedures that are supposed to be done? The doctor will just say theater, will say patient supposed to go to theater. You prepare for that theater. You know what you're supposed to do. You fix the lines, you prepare, you shave the patient, you do pre-medication that has been ordered, is the one you are going to administer. And in some cases, a nurse may not administer those medications because the doctor may prescribe by mistake. It is the responsibility of the nurse to ensure that the medication you are giving is the correct dosages, the right patient for the right condition.
So there's responsibility that's on your shoulders.
There is nothing like saying I administer some medication because the doctor had prescribed. That's why we go to school. In other countries like America, nurse consultant, we call them nurse practitioners, they do prescribe. Even here in Kenya, we prescribe. Like when you go to a dispensary, literally in a dispensary, the nurse is the doctor, he's the clinician, he's the lab person, he's the pharmacist, he's everything. He decides even when to transfer, refer patients and not to refer. So at a dispensary level, the nurse is an intensivist. He does everything. He or she does everything at a dispensary level. But when you go to now from level 3, where you get clinical officers, and level 4, you get doctors and above, now roles start to change. So from there, you have finished outpatient department, you've taken, if they is supposed to go to X-ray, you have extorted that patient to X-ray, it has been done, come back, the doctor will review again the result of the X-ray, or whatever lab, whatever it is, then we'll say, now this one's going to the ward. Your work as a nurse again is to ensure that the pre-medication or services to be offered to this patient prior to taking this patient to the ward are done. Records are properly there. The records will be brought by the record person, but you must make sure you have filled all those records. You are documenting. Of course, documenting is one of the key responsibility. When you go to court and you have not documented, you will lose, because if it is not documented, it is not done. That's what it is. So from there, you will plan. If the patient is going to the ward, you must call the ward. Say, we have an admission. The patient, on phone, you'll explain to the person in the ward the condition of the patient, the type of the medication is getting. So by the time you go to the ward with this patient, the nurse in the ward will have prepared to receive you and made the correct bed. Where you are going to be placed. Because some patients require different types of beds because of the condition they have. If you have a cardiac issue, you'll need to be in a bed that's a cardiac bed. You can't be having a cardiac problem na unapelekwa kitanda orthopedic.
Indeed.
Those kind of things.
These are the things that we talk about.
Correct.
And it's vital that we do that, that we do that.
Very important.
So that we can understand. So that when these conversations are front and center in discourse, when we're talking about International, Nurses Day today, and we're looking at some of the things that have been bedeviled nurses in the country, then we have an understanding of what exactly happens 24 hours round the clock. The Secretary General of the Nurses Union is here with us this morning, Seth Panyako. We're having a conversation around International Nurses Day 2025. It continues after this.
The weather with Spice FM. Spice FM.
Dial star 811 star 802 hash to get this as your skiza tune. KTN, ndio home.
I'm unavailable. They know they see me. I'm unavailable. They know they see me. Shanda pa. They wanna more than a girl.
DJ Tatua.
Kuwa mkono ambao unalima ardhi.
Kenya thrives on agriculture and it's very fruitful. From the highlands that we grow our coffee and tea all the way to the resilient northeastern part with our livestock, and not forgetting the breadbasket in the Rift Valley.
If you're not able to meet an agronomist, you can even view channels whereby you can start from the bottom.
Maisha ya siku hizi ni kujituma. Hakuna haja kwenda kutafuta kazi, na kazi yenyewe iko hapa kwa mchanga.
At Farm Kenya, we celebrate those who make it happen. Farmers who innovate, adapt, and guess what? They're able to feed the nation. Together, we are growing nutrition.
Together, we are growing agriculture.
And together, we are growing Kenya.
at whatever level that you are, the responsibility is pretty heavy when it comes to the work. So, if CBAs have been agreed upon and things have been reached, can we rely on the old age reasoning that we've been given as to why, CBAs cannot be met? In some cases, CBAs are not just for monetary compensation. There are other things that come into play in CBAs. But usually, the money takes the center stage. And oftentimes what you're told is that there's just not enough to go round. What should a nurse earn in Kenya today? What should a nurse earn for the work that they do? And I'm not even talking about being frivolous here. I'm just saying for the work that they do, because what's the shift of I'm asking so many questions at the same time, I'm sorry, but let me start from here. What's the basic shift of a nurse that they would work in terms of hours?
Ideally, nurses are supposed to work between that 6.5 hours to a maximum of 40 hours in a week, depending on your place and depending on the nature of your work.
Okay.
If you are in a very intensive area, you need to work that 6.5 hours. Like a place like ICU, it's very intensive.
Yes.
A place like labor ward, it's very intensive. So if you put nurses on high, very many working hours, you end up with backache problems, and you'll end up prolapse of the discs and what have you, and you'll have back problems, and you'll become a person living with disability.
True.
And we have quite many nurses who have been put in the category of people living with disabilities, and they have certificates, and they're now being exempt from taxes and some other things, just because of the nature of the work that they do. In terms of what a nurse is supposed to earn.
Sorry, just this 36 to 40 hours. So you said, and this is Sunday to Sunday?
That's 6.5. No. The kind of shift that we do, or how we work, you can't say from Monday to Friday or where it's an hour.
In a week.
Because we work 24 hours. We take care of a patient 24 hours, 7 days a week. So if you're, for example, on night shift, there are a number of days you're supposed to work at night and the number of days you're supposed to be on off. But generally, that should translate to that 6.5 hours to 40 hours per week. Yeah.
Okay. So then now, based on that, how much should a nurse earn comfortably?
Yeah, earning is a very relative thing, because when you're negotiating salary, there are various factors that we use. And those factors that we use determine, because when you are looking at your salary also, you cannot go out of the scope of the general salary payment in the country. For example, I've been comparing UHC staff with the doctors. I'm saying UHC staff are earning, doctors are earning according to approved salaries. But the other staff, including nurses, are not earning according to approved salary. So that is a disparity. If you ask me in that line, I'll tell you they're supposed to earn, those UHC staff, according to those levels. But generally, you look at what we want today is to have what has been given to us, paid to us first, before we can say it's not adequate. For example, a nurse is supposed to be earning a nursing service allowance of 30,000. They are getting 20,000, apart from MTRH, more referral. They are supposed to be getting a uniform allowance of 50,000. The ministry set itself at 50,000. But when we went to negotiate, they said they could pay 25,000. It's only MTRH that's paying 25,000. So the other hospitals, some are paying 15,000, some are paying 10. So you see, there's that kind of disparities. But from where I sit, no nurse should be earning below 100,000 Kenya shillings today in Kenya.
Yes. Seth, we talk about as an area that is very critical to the country. One would say it is the engine of the healthcare of this country. Now, there is what you say in terms of what is owed to you has not been paid, and this borders on mistreatment of the nursing fraternity in the country. How does this come to affect service delivery to Kenyans, so that when someone comes to hospital and doesn't get services, just how does that look?
It affects because when you don't pay these people very well, it means their nutrition is compromised. When the nutrition is compromised, you'll have this element related to poor nutrition come in. And you'll have many nurses who are sick. They will not come to hospital. They not come to work. They are not staying in areas, some of them, because of the house allowance that is very small, that has gone to shisha and and the housing levy and the rest. So if a nurse was staying in a 2-bedroom house, will have to go back to maybe a 1-bedroom house. If you are staying in 1-bedroom house, perhaps you'll go back to the slums where you can get a 3,000 house or 4,000 house. That environment alone in those slum area, Madare, Kibira, Mikuru, Kwanjenga, will expose you to those problems. Or even if not yourself, your child will get sick. So you'll have to ask permission to take care of your child, and that reduces the number of nurses on duty. Let me not talk about the nurses alone, because this is an issue of payments cutting across.
Yes.
I want to use as an example, but I won't mention maybe the department. I have friends of mine who are working in a government department where they're literally now walking from home to town. They are walking, most of the workers kutoka kwao, wakifika office it is 10, they are tired, they stay, they rest, then they are told, now you go back, start going back at 2.
Now, Hawaiishi town.
They don't stay in town.
Okay.
They stay very far. But you see, because of these levies and taxes have eaten, they are getting almost nothing. Most of the workers in public sector do some small development in the village through loans. So when you take your loan, and now you are taxed, even the 2/3 rule is not obeyed, so you have no money, so you end up working to have ends meet, and that's what many of these workers are doing. So from where I sit, when you don't look at the welfare of the nurses in totality, you affect the service delivery. For example, you're talking about safe staffing levels. If your staffing level is too bad the way it is in Kenya today, it simply means that if a nurse is supposed to take care of 6 patients, he or she is taking care of 20 or 30 or 40. In the worst scenario, I've gone to a hospital where I went to a ward and I found one nurse alone taking care of 40 patients. Is that witchcraft or mukanga? Are you a mukanga so that you are work? You know, a mukanga can take care of 1,000 people at once, because he will sit there and say,
Use the one.
and I say, the 10 of you are suffering from this. You have been witched by your people. Take this medicine, go and get healed. But here you must give individualized care to these patients. They have different medical conditions. They could be in the same ward, but different medical conditions. They need to be examined. Vital signs are supposed to be taken. They're supposed to be monitored. You know, a situation where you've heard of a patient has died, a nurse didn't even know when the patient died. Because by the time I finish giving medication to 40 patients, what is happening with the first patient, I don't know.
Absolutely.
So by the time I go to document, even my shift is already over. So the safe staffing level for our nurses is extremely important, the nursing delivery. And this cannot happen if adequate funds are not allocated to the Ministry of Health. And if they are allocated to the Ministry of Health and they are diverted to other things, that's where also the problem comes in.
Yeah.
It
seems as though there's a lot of attention, Seth, paid on the brick and mortar, right?
Correct.
Look, they're doing the job. They're doing the 36 to 40. In some cases, unfortunately, more than the 40 hours.
Correct.
They're working for longer hours.
They're not even going on leave.
Or not getting leave, having to walk from, home to work and things like this. And then still come and take on the responsibility of caring for the sick, right?
Yes.
It's the stuff, it's the bricks that you put together. It's the thing. But then there's the softer part of it that comes into play as well, in terms of added training for nurses. We're talking about, softer skills of having to deal with people. You're not going to run away from this one, Seth, but that it has come to the attention of very many people that perhaps that softer skills training also is something that should be done for nurses, where people do complain sometimes about the way in which nurses comport themselves towards patients. It's one thing to take into consideration on this International Day of Nurses. I know it's a bit uncomfortable, isn't it? But it happens, and that you must have heard it before. And interestingly enough, it's not just in Kenya. It seems to be across board that we seem to hear that it's all over. What happens? What's wrong? What happens? And is that something that can be dealt with?
I think maybe we are still having the old-type notion that nurses were very rude and they were beating mothers, especially in labor ward. I came face-to-face when I was a student, and when I completed college in my first employment, I came face-to-face with that brutality. And I managed to take care of that. And that hospital today became one of the best in Mombasa. It is true that we have been accused of those things in the past. But I think with the activities of this union, we have tried to educate our members, to make them understand that where your right begins, the right of the patient ends. And where the right of the patients end, your rights, where your rights end, theirs begin. So we must meet somewhere. The employer, the patient, the citizens, they have the right to healthcare as provided for in the Constitution of Kenya. So we must be compassionate. One of the training that we have as nurses is to be compassionate. And you cannot be compassionate when you are being brutal to the people you are supposed to take care of. We are supposed to be empathic. We are supposed to feel in your shoes, not to be in your shoes, but to feel like you're in your shoes. And we are supposed to be advocates of the patients. So all these attributes that we learn in college do not translate to, cannot translate to being a good nurse if you go out there and you go against it. For example, a nurse that will beat a patient is not compassionate. If you see a patient being mistreated by a colleague or a different person, and you don't become an advocate of that patient to stop that mistreatment, you are not being a nurse advocate. And that is what we do in the Nursing Foundation. When you do the first year of the nursing course, those are the much things you're being taught. How to be compassionate, how to be an advocate of the patient, how to be accountable, how to be responsible, and those things used to happen. But I think if a research was done in that aspect today, it will be quite different. What's happening today is that nurses are now the ones being assaulted by the communities, because nurses have become aware of the litigation issues and they're trying as much as possible to act within the professional expectations. And you have seen many cases where nurses have been assaulted on duty. We have seen cases where a nurse was killed on duty. You see the patient shot a nurse, died in Kiromo Line Hospital. You had that. You had that nurse of a friend of mine, or that patient of a friend of mine who went to a hospital in Pusia and assaulted nurses and other health workers. You've had many of those kind of incidents. So as much as you talk about issues facing nurses and being rude or being what, you also have to go along that. But of recent, I'll say those incidents have declined.
Have they declined?
They're declining, and I wish you are an investigator. Media is one of the investigation arm of society that we have in this country, and you better do the research so that next time I'm coming here, you must be speaking from statistics.
Okay, so let me tell you one, and you can tell me then what can be done. Because by the time I asked you that question, so just 2 months ago, a gentleman was went to a medical facility just off of Jogo Road. And it's important for us to put these things out there. Just off of Jogo Road, he was extremely unwell. And in his illness, a gentleman showed up and had either fallen off or was in an accident on a motorcycle. And his leg was visibly broken. Visibly. So when I say visibly broken, I'm going to spare you the graphics of it. But his leg was visibly broken. He required assistance to move from where the fella on the motorbike brought him to enter into this medical facility. There was a nurse. For all intents and purposes, she was in uniform. But she sat at that desk, right? This man could not walk. He couldn't walk, obviously, because his leg was broken. And there was no attempt to have somebody even come in, help him on a wheelchair, something. And she almost was behaving as though she was annoyed at this man for breaking his own leg, right? And was rather harsh with him in terms of how he should come in to get treated. And the gentleman on the motorcycle had to be the one to now carry him and was asking, okay, so now how do I get from one point to the other? It is a case that happened. And unfortunately, somebody had to come in and say, come on, guys, this should not be the way we should be operating. The doctor then now came in and had to reprimand the nurse, unfortunately, in the presence of other people. So it didn't look good at all. But this actually happened. This is something that happened most recently. It is an isolated case. However, it represents the fear that a lot of people still have, which goes back to my question in terms of training, because we understand that the circumstances, and I'm not justifying any kind of bad behavior, but that the circumstances sometimes can be tough. So when we are talking about what needs to be done in the brick and mortar, which is absolutely necessary as we celebrate this particular day, what happens in terms of training that will enhance the skills?
Correct. One of the things I want to say is that first, if it happened, it was very wrong, but there are things you need to look at. that nurse sitting there, if it were a nurse, because everybody knows
she was in a, that's why I said, that's why I clarified with saying
yes.
that she was in a uniform that one would assume she was.
Not everybody in the uniform is nurses. Some fellows are not nurses, because most likely somebody sitting there with this kind of shortage, it may be a support staff or a records person.
In uniform.
They are employing people called patient assistant, patient attendant, but that cannot be an excuse. Let me explain if it were indeed a nurse.
Okay.
Yesterday, because of my nursing passion, when I was coming home, somebody came from the other side and rolled, and the vehicle turned upside down.
Oh, yeah.
And I had to stop and say, I want to help here. And I called other guys, we pushed the car to the other side, and we removed that person from the vehicle. Because I was feeling if I go and leave this person, he might die. And when I hear that he has died, I'll blame myself.
Sure.
That compassionate of being a nurse. It's natural. You don't even have to be a nurse to help somebody. I have to be very clear. You do not have to be a nurse to help somebody, a sick person. You just have to be a human being.
True.
So the issue of nurses not doing what they're supposed to do is unique to specific fellows, isolated cases. You know, in the past, those things were so many. And ask me why. In the past, we had people called accredited nurses. They have not gone to a school of nursing. They were working as cleaners and they were being promoted. There were so many in county councils. So they know a few things and they are promoted as nurses. So they have no ethics. They don't know what they're supposed to do. Sometimes even maternal mortality rate was very high because of these people that being appointed to even attend to mothers in labor wards.
Yeah.
So we must, as I've said before, we should do a research now to get the situation in the country today. Where are we in terms of the nurse conduct? Because we may not speak on issues where we don't have the statistics to show us. From where I sit, I think we have made tremendous improvement in terms of how we have been treating our patients. I have a hospital like MTRH. I can tell you, I've never heard of this disciplinary cases for the last about 5-7 years. This is an improvement. And we aspire to ensure that all our hospitals in Kenya, we reach them. The only problem we have is that the government sees trade unions as an enemy. They do not give us what deserves for us. As even we're talking today, you know, even that nurse, if it was a nurse, for example, let me go back to that nurse. If it was that nurse, are you aware maybe he was having a backache? Maybe he has been given light duties. That's why he's sitting there. So if you have been told you are on light duty, you can't lift a patient. You can't lift anything. How do you expect me to go and lift that patient when my back has gone already?
Or you could have said, I am I'm not able to stand up. There's somebody who can help you.
As
opposed to responding.
I'm saying I'm not really commenting entirely on that matter because it's a case I don't know.
I hear you.
But I'm just giving assumptions. These are just assumptions. But clearly we may have another nurse who was just rude. People, we're human beings. So you have heard of even doctors who are called to come and attend to patients at night and they refuse. Yeah.
SG. There's a question that is being asked here by one of our listeners, Rogers Odongo, and his question about nurses internship. Why can't union fast track on the list? Number two, why does it seem like the union has abandoned the interns, yet deductions are usually remitted as union fees?
Number one, those interns don't remit deductions from the union of nurses. They are not our members. We the ones who are in internship today that we fought the other time. You know, remember I was here? They all got absorbed. They're not paying anything. They only come to us when they have issues. But when they are settled, they forget about the union. Number two is that I am not aware of any problem that the pre-interns are having, because if they have a problem, they must have some form of leadership. So that leadership rises to my office and tells us that we are supposed to go for internship. These are the challenges we are having. They are sitting. I'm not a student. Interns are clearly students because they are still going through their training process. I went through that process. So they are supposed to have some form of organization. Like the group that has gone had a clear organization. I knew they had the chair. So if I want to communicate, I'll communicate to that chair. So that chair will give me the issues affecting them, and I'll present to the ministry. As we are talking today, I just know the ministry said all interns will go for posting in July. So if they have issues, they must have brought to my attention that these are a number of interns and these are the issues we have. Because if the ministry has said all interns will go for internship in July, mine is to wait in July. If they're not posted, then I ask, why have they not been posted? Even if they're not paying, when they get that job, they don't pay. They are still our children. We want the profession must continue. Because if we don't support them, we'll kill our profession. So we do it voluntary as a union. So when somebody says, we are now is being deducted and it's not even on internship, he's paying using whose money? Paying which union? Money is being how do you deduct when you're a student?
Yeah.
So you have no right to tell us that we are supposed to attend to you when you're not a member. We do it on the basis that, number one, you are the people who are the future. You remember I talked about the future. The future nursing, the future nurses. You are the future. And as people charge the responsibility of protecting the profession, we must ensure that the young people in college transit the way they're supposed to transit and go look for employment.
Sure.
Yeah.
What would be the hope? You know, there's every day there is a celebration of this every year rather, there is a celebration of this particular day. You know, we've had you in this room before, Seth, when we've looked at certain issues. Nurses are going to go on strike because CBAs have not been upheld. Nurses are going to go on strike because, you know, salaries are unpaid in the counties. Nurses are going to go on strike because, you know, just the general upkeep and well-being, you know, of their livelihoods have not been, you know, taken care of. What would be the hope? And interesting enough, we don't seem to have this issue in the private sector.
It is, the private sector, we have serious guys. You know, I will give you an example of the impending national strike by the nurses. I'm just waiting the governing council to come and give me authority to issue the strike notice. I was in another media house yesterday and I was asking myself, the government is telling us it doesn't have 3.5 billion to add on the 4.5 billion that is there to have nurses and other health workers, 8,700 health workers converted into permanent and pensionable. Yet, it has given the presidency 2.5 billion for painting of State House, kwenda kupaka rank, uko State House. It has given the president 12.45 billion of walking around the country and doing premature campaigns. So I asked the president, out of the 15 billion, just give us 3.5 billion to have 8,700 Kenyans work like other workers and live a decent life. It is not so much to ask. You cannot talk of believing in primary health care, believing in universal health care, and you are taking or cobbling 15 billion just for things which are not urgent. And the people who are supposed to be giving the universal health care are crying. So I asked the president yesterday, just remove 3.5 billion from your budget and give to these 8,700 health workers. It is the issue of prioritization. And it's the issue of having being maybe in Kenya we and it's very sad